Very good evening and welcome. You're watching the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna. Inamdar. India has overtaken China as the most populous country in the world. This is according to the latest United Nations data. With roughly 2.4% of the world's land mass, India is now home to nearly a fifth of humanity. Over 1.4 billion people, or more than the entire population of the Americas or Africa or Europe. Of course, we're now more populated than China. Of course, such comparisons have to be made with China, which is also roughly 3 times India's size. But India's population is relatively young and growing, while China's is aging and shrinking. This youth advantage could play a critical role in unlocking economic growth, with over 2/3 of people of working age between 15 to 64 years. India could produce and consume more goods and services, drive innovation, and keep pace with constant technological changes. But with those opportunities also come challenges. We need to make sure that this population is skilled, that there's enough work for the youth that are being generated year after year. So can we deliver those many jobs to such a large amount of people? Can we use this human force to our advantage, and can it cope with the demands of over 1.4 billion people? We're speaking about this today, and to join me are K Yatish Rajawat, CEO, Center for Innovation and Public Policy; Prithviraj Srinivas, Chief Economist at Axis Capital; Poonam Muttreja, Executive Director at Population Foundation of India. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for speaking with us today on the India Development Debate. Ms. Muttreja, let me begin with your take. We knew this was coming. It was a matter of time. And, the interesting fact is that this is UN data. We've still not done our census. Our last census in 2011. So this is, India still has to release its official data. But what does it mean for us at this time?
So what it means at this time is for India to first not panic, because we have done reasonably well in population stabilization, where 24 states have a replacement level fertility, which means that 2 children born replace the 2 parents. But what we need to do is focus more on our young people, given the young population, for, as you rightly said, skilling, but also employability and good wages. In India, wages are still, as you know, very low. So these 3 can be done consecutively. And second, we have to invest a lot in temporary methods. India, for contraception, because we have a large young population who will not go for sterilization, and that has been our focus. So temporary methods, we need to invest more money. We need to make it more accessible to the most marginalized communities. The poor and the most illiterate have more children. Once a woman has literacy rates of even class 12, she's likely to have 2 or less children. So India
one minute, ma'am, just to get some perspective. So you think that this is an issue that needs to be curbed? That it's not a good thing that we're the most populous nation in the world at a time when more and more nations are facing an aging, shrinking population. Isn't this an advantage?
Yes, totally. I was saying what India needs to do, but India needs to invest not just in skilling, but India has a window of opportunity for 25 years. For the demographic dividend. So if we invest in skilling and jobs, we will be able to, not only India's economy will grow, but we will have a population that can serve India as well as rest of the world, which is really worried, much of the world, that is very worried about shrinking populations. That's why I said in the beginning, we don't need to panic, but there are certain things we need to do, invest in our young people. And I don't want to leave it at just skilling. It is also about access to contraception so that we have a steady downward decline. Finally, I want to say that for India, it's an opportunity also to plan for the aging. India will have an aging population, which is already increasing, but we have the time to plan for healthcare and the finances for their social security. I strongly believe that people are a resource, never mind the size of our land. People are a resource, and it is an opportunity for India to move ahead with a strong, healthy population.
Yatish Rajawat, let me come to you for perspective, because there are clearly two disparate points of view on this. For several decades, India's population was considered a bane, something to be controlled. There has been state intervention to control the population, whether it is through education or at some strange phases of our history, even harsher means. It's always been seen as a problem. Has that entire narrative sort of pivoted? Today you have a China that's seeming upset that India has become most populous. There's a statement from their government says that, quantity doesn't matter, quality matters. I mean, whatever that means. So has becoming the most populous nation now being seen as a great thing instead of a problem? That question for Yatish Rajawat, yes.
I think, Tamanna, we need to put this into context. A country crossing population of the largest country, which is China, is a moment in history. But you must understand that our fertility rates are actually dropped. Our fertility rates have dropped from a high of 6.5 in the 80s to less than replacement rates now. So and globally, the world faces actually not a population growth, but the world is actually facing a population slowdown. You have the OECD countries where the birth rates, total fertility rates are 1.6. So even China is witnessing birth rates due to the one-child policy, which are much below the replacement rates. So I mean, while you could have said 20 years back that the population or the fertility rate was a challenge, it's not a challenge anymore. The fertility rate is no longer a challenge. What is a challenge, yes, is the fact that we have possibly the world's largest, youngest population in the world. So, and as your other panelists pointed out, that population needs jobs, and that population needs skills, and that population needs employability to be increased. So it's no longer about population or populace. It's more about how fast we grow the economy and how do we grow the economy. And our structure of growth cannot be the same as China followed, and it cannot also be the same as US or Europe followed. We cannot just take out people from agriculture and assume or presume that they will get absorbed in services or they will get absorbed in manufacturing. We are and we will develop a model which will be very India-centric, more aligned to our population and the fact that we are a populous country and we have a younger population. So if you see that in the last 5 to 7 years, the way the structure of the economy has changed or has shifted, both as a system, which is from the bureaucratic side and from the corporate side, there is a shift towards manufacturing on the corporate side, and the bureaucracy has been shifted downward to more governance and less interference. Technology has become a big
enabler. Where are the jobs? Where are the jobs for this growing population? And we need to grow this economy to a more mechanized manufacturing sector.
No, we don't need to
I'm not even going into AI and the impact of all of that. Isn't that a real concern? What are all of these people going to do?
So where are the jobs? So the jobs are, of course, in manufacturing. The idea of Make in India is to create more jobs in manufacturing. We had let go of that whole segment, 15 years back. We had given it up, saying that we cannot do anything anymore. But, the change in geopolitics, including China plus one strategy that global manufacturers are now following, gives an advantage to India to set up those manufacturing units now. There are new areas of manufacturing which are coming up, which did not exist earlier. Electric vehicles or cell manufacturing is a huge and very labor-intensive processes, which would need large number of people to be employed. Yes, there is an impact on the services side, which is largely due to artificial intelligence or through automation or robotic process automation. And that will reduce the growth of those services jobs. But at the same time, I presume that some of those jobs would get created in the manufacturing sector. Agriculture is again changing. As you know, that small farm productivity is a stated goal, and small farm productivity also results into higher employment per farm rather than mechanized large farms, which was a policy, years back. If you see the latest agriculture cluster policy of the government, where for the first time the government has started giving money to private sector and non-profit to actually create small farm models which are more employment intensive. So I think there is more positive momentum of jobs in the future than there was in the past.
Okay. Prithviraj Srinivas, your take on India becoming most populous, and it was a matter of time. We will continue to grow as China shrinks, as the rest of the world shrinks. Will there be very soon a global talent scramble as well for specific skill sets? And, this whole problem of brain drain that we had several decades ago will re-emerge. There will be a global hunt for people who can do the job, and we will have the population.
No, absolutely. I think let me just put that in context as well, Tamanna. So while our population has reached 1.4 billion, if you look at UN's population projections, this is not going to stop here. So our peak population is going to be 1.7 billion. This is going to be achieved in 2063. So basically 40 years from now. This is an addition of about 300 million people. And we're really talking about accommodating the current US population into India's borders over the next 40 years, right? So this is a fundamental and a structural fact that we simply cannot ignore. It's going to shape how our society lives in the future. So I basically see three predicaments. It will touch upon what some of the other panelists have sort of noted. One, of course, is the jobs question. We will see a working age population increase of about 170 million people. And if we assume that the labor participation rate does not improve from here, then we are talking about new jobs requirement of about 70 million people, right? Now, either this problem gets solved as a combination of higher levels of outward migration, which you were referring to, or capital coming into the country so that these jobs get created here, right? So now the pace at which this happens will completely depend on education as well as reforms. So, for example, if we only focus on education and not enough on reforms, then the pressure will increase towards outward migration. So my sense is that, we need to see both higher focus on education so that, better quality jobs are created in India, and therefore reforms are done so that those jobs are getting created here rather than people having to migrate out. The second predicament that I see is the strain on natural resources. The report itself highlights that the richest 10% account for half of greenhouse emissions. So in India's case, I think the concern will be the increase in strain on the world's as well as our own natural resources as our per capita income rises. So possibly, this gets solved through technology. So, maybe technology it more efficient and less polluting to travel, to make food, and to use water and to live, etc. So the second predicament could get solved through technology. Now the third predicament that I see, and it's something that our fellow panelists highlighted as well, is that the size of India's elderly population is going to rise quite substantially for the first time in our independent history, right? So people who are aged above 65, they made up 3% of our total population in the 1950s. Today, it is about 7%. And when our population peaks 40 years from now, it's going to be 20%, right? So in absolute numbers, the total number of elderly people in India is about 100 billion people today. It's going to more than treble to about 345 million in 2063. So it's going to have implications on healthcare. It's going to have implications on banking, on a whole host of things. So some estimates indicate that the median age in the southern states as well as the western Indian states will probably go towards 45 years, which is the current median age in Europe. So my sense is that there is a lot of things that will change, and businesses will have to adapt. So there are a lot of implications to how demographics will shape how we live and how we do business over the next 15 years.
So, in terms of policy, India is used to dealing with a large population. So we know, how policy movements head there, but some of these issues are certainly serious. Poonam Muttreja, let me come to you, especially the issue on resources. We're already running short with a lot of congestion in big cities, and that internal migration still, continuing in that direction.
So we clearly do need to get industry to invest in rural areas. There is both a pull and push factor at this point of time. But if we have job opportunities in the rural areas, we will not have the kind of migration, and the land, yes, is finite. It's not infinite. So we need to focus on cottage industries and rural economies much more. India, if you compare India to China has maybe 20 or 30 skills for crafts. India has thousands of skills. We could capture the global market which China has captured, and much more, because our skills are many more. So India has somehow in the last almost 5 decades not invested in that sector, which is primarily in the rural areas. Second, there are opportunities, where we need people, we need labor, or we need skilled workers. Health, 40% deficit we have just in the health sector. Why, and for India to set up more medical schools, or use the current medical schools to enroll more children. Finally, India has to invest in, I'm just going back to the discussion earlier, and I will come back more to rural. I strongly believe India mustn't allow only a brain drain. India should collaborate and partner with other countries that need people, where they invest in skills in India and education which is skill oriented. And we've already done that with Japan. India has a MOU, and India must step up similar arrangements with countries like other countries that need people. Going back to rural areas, another factor is that in the schooling, we have the health infrastructure, and we do have infrastructure for schools. We have to improve it. We have to make education more, higher education accessible for both girls and boys, but much more for girls, so that people don't come for everything. Health, they have to come to cities. Education, they have to come to cities. It is, just like we've had a growth of universities around Panipat. Everyone thought the place to go to a good college was Delhi, if you're talking about North India. So we can create very quickly infrastructure for higher education, which in itself will give job opportunities. But we've never looked at rural livelihoods for a long time other than agriculture. And I am not suggesting
you've spoken about universities, so I must cite this study which came out just a couple of days ago, which says that half of all graduates in India are unemployable in the future because of the quality of their degrees. Mr. Srinivas, the question about the quality of this population, and I know China's being churlish when they say this, when they say quality matters more than quantity, but in terms of skilling people and ensuring that they add to the economy, how do we ensure that?
So I'll just give a data point here. So in 2010. There is a database called Barrow-Lee where they look at the number of years of schooling, right, for people aged between 15 and 19. In India, it is about the average schooling years is about 8. It's about 10 to 11 in China and elsewhere, right? Now, my sense is that we would have obviously sort of improved on that front. So the primary schooling is definitely sort of improving. It's something that we'll have to continue to work on. And honestly, if you ask me, China in a way is right? It's about the total value added per worker that matters more than the total number of workers that there are, right? The GDP of the US is far larger than India's, even though it has just 300 million people and we have 1.4 billion people. So the quality of the labor does matter, and that is what I think the other panelists are also referring to, that we need to improve the skills. But I'll add one more point here. It's not just about focusing on education and skills. If we just do that, yes, we'll have a lot of skilled people, but if there are not enough reforms that make it easier to do business here, then capital is not going to come here. The factories are not going to get set up here. So we'll just have to go abroad and use those skill sets there. So I think it's a combination of both ensuring that our skill set rises, as well as ensuring that capital comes into the country and those jobs get set up here rather than elsewhere, right?
Absolutely. It's going to be a challenge to manage this. For now, for today, we can definitely say that, hey, we're the most populous country in the world. And the narrative on this has clearly changed over the last several years. It used to be a sign of danger. It used to be something we had to control. Population control has been part of our policy. We're doing it now through more education. And the trend will, after 30 years, continue to slide downwards for India as well. It already is happening for a large part of humanity. The question is, how can we make the most of this 3-decade window we have to ensure that India's demographic dividend truly shines? Thank you to all of you for joining us this evening on the India Development Debate. We'll take a very short break, but we're back with a lot more. Stay tuned.